I'm Delphine Dean, and I know bioengineering. One of the other projects we're working on in the lab is looking at how your cartilage and your bones and different tissues get affected if you were to go in space. So if you think about the astronauts, they're going up in the space shuttle, they go to the space station, and they're sitting there out with no gravity and away from the protective atmosphere of the Earth up in space, and they're there for several months. If we were ever to send astronauts to Mars, it would take, many years, and these astronauts would be floating around in the craft, and they also, since they're not under the atmosphere of the Earth, they will actually get more radiation from the sun. So that's the same thing if you think about when you go outside and you don't put on sunscreen, you get sunburns, but a lot of the harmful rays from the sun get blocked by the air around the Earth. But once you're outside the Earth, you don't have that protective atmosphere, so now these astronauts are getting radiation, as well as the fact that they're floating in space. So if you've seen the movie WALL-E, the people in the WALL-E movie, right, they become kind of sedentary, they don't move around very much, and there's an explanation in that their bones will all go away because the bones are not loaded. That's a very well-known issue. If you don't use your muscles and you don't run and load your bones and stand up on them, your body doesn't think you'll need them, so it basically uses up the calcium for something else. And so that's actually what happens to the astronauts in space, because when they're in space and they're weightless, there's not the weight of their body constantly loading the bones, and so the bones over time will go away. And this is actually a big problem even when they're there for only a couple months. When they come back, it takes many years for the bones to recover. One thing we're looking at in my lab is actually also how cartilage tissue is affected. Cartilage is the tissue that's on top of your bones in your joints, so in your knee, in your shoulder. It's what makes up the meniscus, if any of you have heard of athletes getting meniscus tears and things like that. And that's the tissue that goes away when you have arthritis. And it is also regulated by load. So if you're walking around, you're constantly loading these things. It kind of acts as a shock absorber so your bones don't hurt. And once the astronauts are in space again, they're not loaded, so the tissue doesn't get the proper mechanical stimulus, and it starts to degrade as well. And so that's been known, but what we're looking at in my lab is how radiation will affect these tissues. And so what we found is that while the unloading of the tissue causes all sorts of problems, the radiation environment, so once you're outside of the Earth's protective atmosphere, the radiation you get from the sun will actually make things worse. And so we're looking at possibly trying to have the astronauts take some medicine before they go so that they can counteract that. And so it's a big problem for NASA. But it's also a problem for everyone here on Earth, because this is the type of radiation that gets used for cancer therapies. If you've heard of people getting radiation treatments to get rid of a tumor, it's very similar to the radiation that the astronauts get in space, except they get lots of it at once. So if we can understand what goes on in your tissue when you get that radiation, maybe we can give the patients something before they get their treatments, so that they don't have any detrimental effects later on in life.